Book was a lot of fun to read. Our special plays consists of the transcripts of a series of podcasts about Silent Hill. It's really fun because it's just like you're sitting in on a conversation with two friends. They go over all the video games, except for the most recent one, Silent Hill Ascension, and they also talk about the movies, the comic books, and all the merchandise related to Silent Hill. This is one of the best books that I've read this year, just because of how much fun I had with it. Each chapter follows the same format. They're transcripts from a series of podcasts, which help with the structure of each chapter since they're all pretty much laid out the exact same. The chapters are dedicated to one of the games, or one of the movies, or just a particular subject, like the comic books are all tackled in one chapter. Most of the talk about the games in the Silent Hill series, but yeah, they do go over the other stuff, as I've mentioned. Brock handles the introductions to these chapters, and he does a really good job with it. It's very funny when he starts talking or when he comes up with the elevator pitches for the different games. Then you switch over to Whitney and she kind of explains the story of whatever media that they're going over. And every so often Brock will chime in with something. It's pretty fun and, it does flow very well. Their interactions are really great in these chapters. It's just like a happy conversation from two people who just really want to talk about the video games or the movies or comic books that they either really like or one of them likes and the other one doesn't, or they both just kind of agree that, yeah, this isn't the best thing ever. They do try to find some of the good in the things that they're reviewing, even if they don't like it. Like the comic books, where they mention that they're not really that great. They don't really feel like Silent Hill stories for the most part. But the artwork is pretty good in at least a few of them. And I believe one or two of the comics they both really enjoyed because it felt more like a Silent Hill story, whereas the others just kind of feel like random things happening in a town that could be Silent Hill. I didn't really like the comic books all that much either. I think they're a little strange. But yeah, there is some good stuff in them. There weren't too many things that they disagreed on, and when they did disagree, it didn't seem to just devolve into a shouting match between the two of them. It was rather refreshing to see people talking reasonably about these things, and it's starkly contrasted with every experience that I've had about people talking about the video games that they like, especially when you run into, some of the gatekeepers on any particular fandom. The book is laid out in a chronological order, so they go over all of the games and the movies in the order that they were released. I like this better than trying to fit all these things into some sort of a cohesive timeline, like where you would start with Origins and then go on to some of the others, and it would just get really convoluted. By going through them one at a time by their release date, it just sort of cleans everything up. They do try to find the good in each game, but they don't sugarcoat it when there's something that they don't like, or when the games have certain flaws to them. This really becomes apparent when they talk about Silent Hill 4, and then when they bring up the HD collection later on, where they both kind of agree that Silent Hill 4 is a very frustrating game to play. And yeah, based on everything I've read, it has some issues, but it is kind of fun, and what they say, it is an enjoyable game at some point, but yeah, very frustrating to play. And the HD collection is just, I don't think I need to go into that, or really go over what they said, since most people kind of hate it. It was fantastic to read about these games, and just read through this conversation because it is just a lot of fun, especially when Brock is bringing up questions about certain things or when he is a little bit off on when he explains something. And Whitney's there to kind of correct him or clarify certain things at some point. It's just a really cool conversation. There are 2 points that really stand out to me when I was going through this. And I already mentioned one, it was Silent Hill 4. And this is one of the games that seems to be between being its own thing and being in like the continuity of the series, if you can even say that there is continuity in this series, because it doesn't really take place in Silent Hill. It takes place somewhere else. It does have a few tie-ins back to Silent Hill, but they're sort of tenuous at best. And yeah, it feels like it's trying to be its own thing, but also be a Silent Hill game, if that makes any sense. And they do bring this up. So all of these recordings were done during the COVID-19 lockdown, and it just sort of reminded me, yeah, I probably should have played Silent Hill 4 during that. It would have been kind of a fun experience. But yeah, it's kind of a fun thing to mention here, even though the lockdown sucked. The other game that they talk about, or at least the one that I wanted to focus on, their conversation about Silent Hill Downpour, that one seems really, really interesting because it's one of those games that kind of got trashed by critics, and they go over the critical reception to all of these games as well as the fan reception to them. But they're pretty harsh on the critical reception to Downpour, and I can completely understand why. Part of it has to do with just the way it was released and how it needed patches in order to actually work. And that can kind of be a hit to it. But once it got those patches, it seemed to be a pretty enjoyable game. I haven't played it, and I'm a little worried about it because it's kind of hard to find now, and I'm not totally sure if my physical copy would be able to get the patches. But yeah, it's a whole nother situation. It's just when I have looked at things, it's a very interesting story, and it's got a really cool plot and everything, but it was just one of those games that seemed like it just got crapped on by everyone because it wasn't made by Team Silent. Or maybe there's some other reason that I missed while I was reading this. So I was really looking forward to what they had to say about the 2 movies. And yeah, the first one, and so I liked the first movie, the first Silent Hill movie, and I remember seeing the second one, but I couldn't tell you anything about it because I don't remember anything about the second movie at all. So reading this was pretty cool. They give you a plot synopsis of both stories. They explain how the first one did a lot to try to make it feel like a Silent Hill video game by replicating some of the different camera angles used in the first game, and how it was kind of a reimagining of the first game. They also bring up a lot of the extra scenes that got shot and inserted into it because of studio interference and them thinking, well, there's too many female characters, you need to shove Sean Bean back in there again because he's in this movie too, and there need to be more male characters in it. The second movie, they bring up a lot of really interesting stuff and how it was just complete studio interference all around. And honestly, you could just call the movie Silent Hill Studio Interference 3D. It suffered a lot just from people wanting to shove things into it to really hammer home that this is a Silent Hill movie. And also just making some very odd choices because plot lines are just kind of dropped, characters just appear and disappear, story is sort of thrown out the window at times in order to just do something that looks kind of cool. It's a bit of a mess. And from reading their descriptions of it and having no memory of what happened in the movie from when I saw it all those years ago, yeah, it's one that I'm probably not going to go back and look at. I should also mention that both Brock and Whitney share their favorite video game movies, which is kind of cool. Uh, and that sort of ties into how the first Silent Hill was one of the better video game adaptations into a movie at the time, because there was just kind of a lot of really bad ones and really odd ones. And there were movies that were based on video games that you just kind of forget about, like the Double Dragon movie that just sort of slips through the cracks. It's very interesting to go over these just because of how strange the second movie felt. But yeah, both of them really look like Silent Hill films. They got the atmosphere of a Silent Hill video game down, but the story, especially for the second one, just goes off the rails, which is shocking, but not really unexpected from a video game movie. This is also where they go over the comic books as well. And then they also talk about the merchandise. And I have not mentioned this, but at the end of each chapter, they go over the merchandise that Whitney has collected, because she has a Guinness World Record for the most Silent Hill merchandise, which may or may not have been surpassed at this point. But it's kind of cool to hear about the different things that she's collected that have been related to Silent Hill. There's a lot more to this book than what I've talked about here. Every game has a really fun conversation about it. The talks about the comics are pretty interesting. And I really enjoyed hearing about the different merchandise that Whitney has collected. I miss a lot by only talking about what they said about two games. They tend to avoid theories about the endings, which makes a lot of sense, but they do cover each ending. They don't try to go into fan theories about what certain things mean or anything like that. But there was one point that I want to bring up. They talked about one fan theory that's kind of mentioned in passing at the very beginning, and it has to do with one of the moderators on the Silent Hill wiki having a meltdown over his own kind of bizarre theories about how Silent Hill is all about male genital mutilation, so basically getting your child circumcised. That's kind of alluded to, or at least that's what I thought they were talking about, because that's the only bizarre fan theory that seemed to fit in with what they were saying. And it's never really brought up again, and they don't dedicate like a podcast to talking about the fandom, which, unless I missed it in the book, because it is a rather long book, it was a little odd that they mentioned that at the beginning and then didn't bring it up again. So yeah, I can understand that they don't want to talk about it, because it is kind of a weird thing to bring up, especially when you're talking about Silent Hill and there's just no supporting evidence to this guy's bizarre theory. I also don't really know where to put this part, but Whitney talks about her Silent Hill themed, I'm going to mess this up, Puslot machine. It's a pachinko machine, but it's got a different spelling to it. She mentions that it cost her more to ship it to the US than just actually paying for it on the auction site. And unless I read that wrong, and if I did, I apologize for it. It's really cool that she has it. Even if that sort of thing isn't my thing, it's really cool that she has this Silent Hill themed pachinko machine. So yeah, this was a really fun book. Brock and Whitney have just a great conversation about the games, the comics, the movies, and all the merchandise. If you're a fan of the Silent Hill games, you'll probably like this book. It's just awesome. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments section below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.